Hey everyone, this is the Hot Revenge community. Ready to hear a brand new, sizzling story? Then get comfortable, because we're getting started. My parents spent the entire family dinner gushing about my brother's new house. It was a massive four-bedroom estate, complete with a heated pool and lavish Italian drapes. Mom practically radiated pride, as if she had personally overseen every detail of its construction. The clinking of forks and bursts of laughter filled the dining room, and I instantly felt 12 years old again, completely invisible, entirely out of focus. Then Mom's eyes landed on me, her voice sickeningly sweet. "Vanessa, wouldn't you love to stay there sometime?" Everyone laughed except me. I calmly set down my fork, steady and composed, offering a faint, controlled smile, just enough to unsettle them. They still had no idea who truly owned the properties they were celebrating. When I was a child, I believed silence was the best way to maintain peace. In my family, peace meant letting my mother dominate every room and never daring to interrupt her. She was utterly convinced that my brother Miles was flawless. If he made a mess, it was dismissed with a casual, "Boys will be boys." If I returned home with excellent grades, she would simply remark, "That's what's expected of you." It took me years to understand that she wasn't spiteful, she simply didn't register my existence. From the outside, our suburban home looked perfect. Freshly painted walls, immaculately trimmed hedges, the kind of place where neighbors smiled politely as they walked by. Inside, however, it was a home designed for a single favorite child. My brother's bedroom was twice the size of mine, walls adorned with trophies from teams that never even won championships. Mom clapped the loudest for him, even when he barely contributed. I remember standing in the hall, clutching my blue ribbon from the science fair, hoping she would look up. She never did. She was busy frosting a cake to celebrate my brother's failed math test. Dad stayed quiet. I think he cared for both of us, but he valued peace above all else. His way of showing affection was subtle, driving me to school when Mom forgot, or slipping me candy when she scolded me for being too sensitive. I always hoped he would step in to balance the dynamic, but silence was his defense. Only one person ever truly acknowledged me, my Aunt Judith, Dad's sister. She wielded a quiet, commanding presence, single, successful, and entirely independent. On my 12th birthday, she gave me a small leather-bound journal. "Write down every goal you have," she advised. "One day, you'll show them your results instead of having to tell them." That journal became the blueprint for my escape. By high school, I stopped seeking my mother's approval and focused solely on tangible achievements. I majored in business, earned scholarships, and juggled 2 jobs, while my brother drifted through college parties and family-funded internships. Mom called him ambitious. She labeled me stubborn. After graduation, I used all my savings to purchase a tiny duplex in a less desirable part of St. Louis, Missouri. I taught myself plumbing, painting, repairs, everything. I didn't tell anyone. Every property I acquired became another hidden asset, another piece of the private empire I was quietly building. By 34, I owned 6 properties across St. Louis, 3 of them in the exclusive neighborhood where my brother's mansion stood. Mom assumed I lived in a modest downtown apartment and drove a used car, believing I didn't care about appearances. She was right. I cared about control far more than wealth. Yet a small part of me wished she might one day ask about my life, genuinely curious, not to compare or boast. That question never came. Instead, dinner invitations arrived laced with obligation, each one a recital of my brother's successes and his wife Tiffany's immaculate home. Sitting at the table, I felt the weight of all the years of neglect. Tonight, however, my silence would carry a new meaning. The dinner began smoothly, at least on the surface. Mom floated around the room, behaving like she was hosting a state banquet, fussing over napkins and bragging about her perfected recipes. Dad poured wine silently. My brother remained the center of attention, while Tiffany laughed too loudly at his jokes and brushed invisible dust from his designer jacket. "Miles just finished the backyard redesign," Mom announced proudly as she carved the roast, as if slicing a ribbon. "A pergola, fire pit, koi pond. Isn't that impressive? I responded with the practiced, polite smile I had worn for years. Sounds nice. Mom's eyes flicked toward me. You would truly enjoy it, Vanessa. It's so different from… What is it? That cozy apartment of yours. There it was, the dig disguised as kindness. I took a slow sip of wine instead of replying. Tiffany leaned in, head tilted. You should definitely drop by sometime. We have so much space now. You could finally see what a genuine home feels like. The table laughed softly. Dad coughed in mild discomfort. Aunt Judith paused mid-bite, casting me a quick, meaningful glance. Breathe. I stared at my plate, cutting small, precise pieces of meat I no longer had the appetite to taste. Every sound became painfully sharp, the clinking cutlery, my brother's smug laughter, Mom's pride-drenched voice. I had endured this cycle my whole life, subtle insults, my achievements ignored while his mediocrity was glorified. Mom wasn't done. She raised her wine glass, swirling it for dramatic effect. Oh, speaking of the house, she said, eyes twinkling, Miles, tell your sister about those marble countertops. They were imported from Italy. Sure thing, he said with a confident grin. It's quite something. Maybe Vanessa can stay for a little while. You'd love it, sis. Then came the final phrase that threatened to shatter my composure. Mom turned to me, her voice syrupy. Vanessa, wouldn't you love to stay there sometime? Laughter rippled around the table, cruel in its intent though light in tone, expecting me to offer my usual polite nod and fade into the background. This time, I did not. I set down my fork meticulously. The quiet click against the porcelain carried more weight than any shouted word. Aunt Judith met my gaze once again, her expression unwavering, granting silent permission. I leaned back and drew a deep breath. For the first time, I wasn't suppressing the humiliation. I was studying it, measuring it, waiting for my moment. If they wanted to see what I had built, I would reveal it entirely on my terms. Driving back to St. Louis that evening, the streetlights streaked across the glass, blurring and unsettling. Mom's voice echoed in my mind, sweet, sharp, and defining. I muted the music, embracing the quiet inside the car. Silence, once a signal of surrender, now became a source of power. When I arrived at my apartment, my jaw ached from holding in so much frustration. I grabbed a glass of water but left it on the counter, turning instead to my computer. The screen's glow lit the room just enough. Property deeds, financial spreadsheets, mortgage papers. My entire world was displayed. A private success story hidden from my family. 6 properties, all under my name, including rented duplexes, condos, and single-family homes, all generating steady income. 3 of these were located in the same upscale district as my brother's sprawling mansion. The contrast was almost comical. I reviewed every document carefully. My heart rate remained steady. People assume success must be loud, I thought. Sometimes it is best kept quiet. Aunt Judith called just before midnight. Her intuition was always perfect. Are you all right, kid? She asked. I'm past being all right, I answered. I have the evidence now. She chuckled softly. I figured as much. You stayed silent for far too long. What's your plan? Dinner next Sunday? Mom invited everyone. A brief pause. Good, she said finally. Make sure they remember it. After the call, I leaned back, gazing at the St. Louis skyline. Downtown lights pulsed like a slow heartbeat. I reflected on every late night at construction sites, coordinating contractors and brushing drywall dust off my shoes, while my brother bought yet another expensive car funded by Mom. I recalled every sarcastic remark about how real achievement meant extravagance. I had built everything deliberately and quietly, brick by brick, for moments like this. I reached for the old leather journal Aunt Judith had given me years ago. The cover was worn, the pages yellowed, my early hesitant handwriting now confident. On the first page, I had written, "One day they'll see." I turned to a clean page and wrote, "Tomorrow they will." The next day was devoted to preparation, collecting documentation, title deeds, financial statements, tax forms, everything notarized, sealed, perfect. I wasn't building a show of vanity. I was preparing a precise, irrefutable presentation of fact. When Sunday arrived, I adjusted the collar of a plain navy dress in the mirror. Composed on the surface, my eyes sharp beneath. No anger, no tears, just the truth. The drive to my parents' house felt shorter than usual. Familiar homes passed like scenery in a play I had outgrown. The closer I got, the lighter I felt, as if each mile shed an old layer of restraint. By the time I parked, I was no longer the overlooked daughter. I was the storm they had never anticipated. The house appeared unchanged, the same red brick, the same porch light flickering over the steps. But tonight it was different. It wasn't just a home, it was a stage, and I had finished playing the silent minor role. The familiar scent of roast beef and rosemary filled the kitchen. Mom was humming, setting the table with her finest china. My brother sipped wine confidently, Tiffany perched beside him in an expensive silk blouse. Dad pretended to read the newspaper by the counter. Aunt Judith sat at the far end, her expression unreadable. "Vanessa," Mom greeted me, syrupy as always. "We were just discussing Miles's open house. It's truly spectacular." "I've seen it," I replied simply, taking my seat. Dinner began as usual. Boasting, comparisons, subtle insults. But this time, I did not react. My brother leaned back, flashing his confident smile. "We're thinking of adding a guest suite soon," he said, looking at Mom. "Maybe you could stay there, Vanessa. See what success really looks like." Mom laughed, attempting politeness. "Oh, Miles, don't tease your sister." Then turning to me with fake sweetness, "But truly, honey, you would love to stay. It's much more spacious than your little apartment." There it was again, the thinly disguised insult. I smiled faintly. "You think so?" Dad's eyes flicked up. He noticed the shift. Aunt Judith slowly set down her fork, poised. Mom, oblivious, continued, "Of course. Your place seems so temporary, dear. You should see what Miles has built. 4 bedrooms, a pool, marble countertops." Tiffany added, "Imported from Italy, everything." "You can truly feel the quality," Mom concluded. A tense silence followed. I folded my napkin neatly and placed it beside my plate. "You're right," I said softly. "You can feel the difference." Mom's smile widened, pleased. "Exactly." "No," I interjected, voice calm and even. "Because I own 2 houses next door to his, and one directly across the street." The air went dead silent. Mom's smile vanished instantly. My brother blinked, his confident grin faltering. "What?" he asked. I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. "You heard me. 2 nearby, 1 opposite. Which property would you prefer to stay in?" The silence was absolute. Dad's fork clattered softly. "Vanessa," he began, voice low and uncertain. I turned to him gently. "Dad, I've been buying property for over a decade, entirely on my own. While Mom funded Miles's 3rd business attempt, I was working 2 jobs, fixing rentals, and saving. I didn't need help from the family. I just needed space to build." Tiffany let out a nervous, clipped laugh. "You must be joking." I pulled a small folder from my bag and slid it across the table. Inside were the notarized property deeds. "No joke." My brother's hand trembled as he flipped through the pages. This isn't real." Mom's face turned bright red. "Vanessa, how could you do this?" "How could I?" I interrupted, still calm. I worked hard. I kept my success private. You taught me that. Remember when you said good girls don't brag? For the first time, Mom had no reply. I continued, my voice steady. You spent your life boasting about what Miles owned. Maybe you should have noticed what I was achieving. Aunt Judith's small smile revealed pride, her eyes glinting with quiet satisfaction. My brother pushed the folder away. You rent that apartment downtown. I do, I confirmed, because it's a smart financial decision. My tenants pay my mortgages. I don't require marble to feel successful. His wife's cheeks flushed red. You're trying to embarrass us. I tilted my head. No, I'm simply being honest. Mom finally snapped, her voice sharp. You are being disrespectful, Vanessa. This is not acceptable family behavior. I laughed quietly. Family? The ones who never saw me, never supported me, and never asked how I was unless it benefited Miles. Respect goes both ways, Mom. Dad cleared his throat, his voice shaky. She is correct, Mom snapped, turning toward him. Don't start, George. No, he said louder, with a firmness I had never heard before. You've been blind, Carol. You made our daughter invisible in her own house. Look at her now. She built everything you ever wanted for Miles, without any of our help. The room went silent again, heavier than before. Mom's eyes welled with tears, humiliation on full display, not remorse. You trapped us. I didn't, I replied softly. I just answered your question. I slowly pushed back my chair, the legs scraping against the floor. Enjoy your dinner. I paused at the doorway. And Miles, I'll keep the porch lights on, just in case you ever need to rent one. Behind me, I heard Tiffany gasp, Mom's muffled cry, and Aunt Judith's soft, satisfied laugh. Dad said nothing, but when I glanced back, our eyes met. He looked proud and sad. Outside, the cold air felt like freedom. I paused in the driveway, gazing at my brother's house across the street, the house they had idolized. Under the streetlights, it looked small. As I drove away, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror, steady, resolved, the woman I had always wished Mom could see. And maybe, finally, she did. 3 months passed without contact. By then, the news had spread. My brother's mansion was listed for sale. A real estate contact confirmed my suspicion. He had taken out a second mortgage to maintain appearances. The house they had bragged about had become his downfall. Mom stopped calling after that dinner. She texted once, "You humiliated us." I never responded. Weeks later, Dad reached out, looking tired. I should have defended you sooner, he said. I said nothing, but stayed. That was enough. I focused my energy on something new, the Horizon Fund, a scholarship for children told they weren't good enough. The first 10 recipients stood on stage with me at the launch, their parents clapping with the pride I had once longed for. When the applause ended, I stood under the lights, calm, unburdened. The mansion, the dinners, the silence, it had all led here. Revenge is sometimes quiet. It is steady. It is peace. That night, I drove past my brother's old neighborhood. The porch lights of my properties glowed softly, a quiet, undeniable proof that I had already won. I felt no anger, only freedom. Silence, for the first time, was healing. If you've ever had to prove your worth to people who ignored you, know you are not alone. Share your story in the comments, and hit subscribe, because every quiet victory deserves to be heard. Her own house. Look at her now. She built everything you ever wanted for Miles, without any of our help. The room went silent again, heavier than before. Mom's eyes welled with tears, humiliation on full display, not remorse. You trapped us. I didn't, I replied softly. I just answered your question. I slowly pushed back my chair, the legs scraping against the floor. Enjoy your dinner. I paused at the doorway. And Miles, I'll keep the porch lights on, just in case you ever need to rent one. Behind me, I heard Tiffany gasp, Mom's muffled cry, and Aunt Judith's soft, satisfied laugh. Dad said nothing, but when I glanced back, our eyes met. He looked proud and sad. Outside, the cold air felt like freedom. I paused in the driveway, gazing at my brother's house across the street, the house they had idolized. Under the streetlights, it looked small. As I drove away, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror, steady, resolved, the woman I had always wished Mom could see. And maybe, finally, she did. 3 months passed without contact. By then, the news had spread. My brother's mansion was listed for sale. A real estate contact confirmed my suspicion. He had taken out a second mortgage to maintain appearances. The house they had bragged about had become his downfall. Mom stopped calling after that dinner. She texted once, "You humiliated us." I never responded. Weeks later, Dad reached out, looking tired. "I should have defended you sooner," he said. I said nothing, but stayed. That was enough. I focused my energy on something new, the Horizon Fund, a scholarship for children told they weren't good enough. The first 10 recipients stood on stage with me at the launch, their parents clapping with the pride I had once longed for. When the applause ended, I stood under the lights, calm, unburdened. The mansion, the dinners, the silence, it had all led here. Revenge is sometimes quiet. It is steady. It is peace. That night, I drove past my brother's old neighborhood. The porch lights of my properties glowed softly, a quiet, undeniable proof that I had already won. I felt no anger, only freedom. Silence, for the first time, was healing. If you've ever had to prove your worth to people who ignored you, know you are not alone. Share your story in the comments, and hit subscribe, because every quiet victory deserves to be heard.